What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 6 fantasy running back starts and sits for every single matchup, so make sure to tune in. And if you guys enjoy in the meantime, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week continues. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter for some exclusive content. But in the meantime, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdown, we want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who we've actually been using since the start of the NFL season, specifically their matchup shop function, which is absolutely awesome. And let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B game can get a little bit boring. Well, that's where the matchup shop function comes into play, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups. All you have to do is put your bet in terms of who you think will have a higher fantasy performance. And it's incredibly simple as well. Just like a normal bet would work, you've got your different spreads, anywhere from Thursday night football to Sunday's games, or even Monday night football. You can have a number of different possibilities and choices. You will find a bet that you love, whether it's two running backs versus each other, two quarterbacks, two wide receivers. Honestly, it's all there. And if you guys want to even get a couple different bets going, Overlay Fantasy allows you to do that, as well as you can put single bets, but you can also get a couple of bets together on one matchup slip and get a big parlay going for a big time payout. And honestly, if the NFL isn't your thing, have no fear. Overlay Fantasy has got other options like golf, MLB, and the NBA. So make sure to check it out and have all that homework you're doing not only benefit your fantasy squad, but your wallet as well. For our first matchup of the week, we've got the Chicago Bears at the Carolina Panthers. And when it comes to running backs to start here, I love both of these prospects. But as crazy as it sounds, I actually like David Montgomery more so than Mike Davis. And this is primarily because of the matchup involved. And we saw it this last week. Even though the Panthers were able to contain the Falcons, they couldn't really stop Todd Gurley. And that has been their Achilles heel all year long. That rush defense just cannot hold up. And with Montgomery getting more and more involved every single week, I think he's got low-end RB1 potential for week 6. Whereas Mike Davis, don't get me wrong, he has been amazing. An RB1 since Christian McCaffrey got hurt these last 3 weeks. But this is a tough matchup versus the Chicago Bears rush defense. Now, I will say in PPR formats, I still like the upside in Mike Davis, and he's probably right on par with David Montgomery, maybe even a little bit higher. But in standard formats, I think that rushing volume and that rushing production might be a little bit lower. So overall, I probably have Mike Davis as a high-end RB2 on the week. But regardless, both these guys must starts in my opinion. Then we've got the Broncos at the Patriots. And here, this was a game that got postponed from week 5 now to week 6. And I would say if Cam Newton plays, I feel much more confident in starting both Damian Harris and James White. And if that is the case, then I would also, like you see here, have Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay as sits, because then I think that matchup and the Patriots overall as a team become much better. And this won't be as close of a contest, which is going to deter Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. But as far as the starts, Damian Harris, just like we've said before, he's the guy that I prefer in standard formats with Sony Michel banged up right now. And then James White as that pass-catching guy in PPR formats. I think both these guys would land in the low-end RB2 in those respective categories. Whereas right now, like I said, Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay both listed as sits. This is presuming that Cam Newton returns. And if he doesn't, then I would tentatively start Melvin Gordon, still sit Phillip Lindsay. You know, I think it's going to be very close to a 50-50 split, but at least in that first game that Lindsay comes back from injury in, I think maybe Melvin Gordon has a little bit of a higher stake in this running attack. So for that reason, I would prefer, if you start anyone, for it to be Melvin Gordon. Moving on, we've got the Browns at the Steelers, and Kareem Hunt is a must start every single week, regardless of the matchup. Yes, I realize the Steelers are a very tough defense, but Kareem Hunt without Nick Chubb, the guy is a top 10 running back Love him in PPR formats as a pass catcher. This is still a run-first team. Don't forget that, and Kareem Hunt dominated in that category. Then as far as the Steelers are concerned, you're starting James Conner. He is the workhorse running back on this team. And I think that both him and Kareem Hunt can be top 15 type of running backs for week 6. And then as far as our sits, we're going to sit D'Ernest Johnson just because I know a lot of people were very excited this last week picking him up off of waivers, but we said just probably sit Johnson. He's not going to get the same type of volume that he did versus the Dallas Cowboys. The upside isn't there in terms of the matchup, and now even more so. This is an incredibly tough Steelers defense. I am fading Johnson even more so in week 6. From here, we've got the Bengals at the Colts. I'm starting Joe Mixon. I'm starting Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor is a guy that I think has a much higher ceiling in this matchup. The Colts have been pretty decent as a defense versus the run. So again, we said it with Joe Mixon. We know he blew up in week 4, but temper those expectations in week 5, and that's exactly what happened. Both these guys I would put in the RB2 category. I would say the upside for Jonathan Taylor, however, is higher. And then as far as our sits, I will sit Nyheim Hines. I just don't have enough comfort starting him. He's already limited being a PPR type of start primarily. And with the passing attack looking the way it is and Phillip Rivers just not playing all that great, I am fading Nyheim Hines. Then we've got the Lions at the Jaguars. And usually I'm sitting all the running backs for Detroit, but I'll actually start Adrian Peterson this week, and that's because he's facing this Jaguars defense that has had a tough go at it in terms of stopping opposing running backs. Yes, Adrian Peterson doesn't offer much upside as far as a PPR running back, but I think he can get you around, 15 carries for 80 to 90 yards. It won't be sexy, but he'll be a low-end RB2 on the week in standard scoring. And then James Robinson, I'm much more excited about starting him. Yes, he had a bit of a, poor week in week 5, but I do think he bounces back here versus the Detroit Lions in that mid to high end RB2 category. And then I will sit Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. Just too many other running backs in that backfield. DeAndre Swift, I think he's kind of in that Nyheim Hines category, is more so as a pass catcher. If he continues to get more and more work as a rusher, then we can start talking about him being a start for the Lions. But for now, I am fading him and Kerryon. Before continuing, I want to tell you guys a little bit about a new partner of ours in Thrive Fantasy, which is an absolutely awesome daily fantasy sports app that specializes in player props. And the great thing about Thrive Fantasy is that it's super simple to use, as they've eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. Literally, all you have to do is find a contest and join it. From there, just select the props you like and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And it's not just the NFL. There's NBA, MLB, PGA. Literally, you think it, Thrive Fantasy has it. In fact, Thrive has awarded over $1.5 million in prizes since launching in 2018 and has $50,000 guaranteed in prizes weekly. So sign up today, and when you use promo code ALLDAY on sign up, you receive an instant match bonus up to $50. You can download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store, Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. So stop waiting, sign up today, use promo code ALLDAY, and start propping up today. Then we've got the Texans at the Titans, and I'll start David Johnson and I'll start Derrick Henry. Obviously, Derrick Henry is the option that you much more prefer starting here. And with the Titans, knock on wood that no more positive COVID cases and they'll finally be able to start playing. If that's the case, Derrick Henry, a top 10 running back. David Johnson, we've got a bigger sample size now with him. I think we can safely call him a low-end to mid-level RB2, primarily in PPR formats. So that's how I view both these running backs in this matchup. Then we've got Washington at the Giants, and the running back I feel most comfortable starting here would be Antonio Gibson. He's getting the majority of the volume in terms of rushing. snaps, and then also pass catching wise. So I like him here as probably a high-end RB2 versus this Giants defense. As far as our sits, J.D. McKissic is someone that doesn't offer all that much in standard scoring. He's primarily a pass-catching type of running back. Again, similar to maybe that Nyheim Hines, James White category. If you're desperate in a PPR scoring situation, then maybe I take a flyer on McKissic, primarily because he's playing the Giants defense. But other than that, I don't think he has all that much long-term appeal. And then Devonta Freeman, he was someone we told you to start this last week versus the Cowboys. He had a relatively successful outing and looked pretty good. But I think this is a tougher defensive matchup versus Washington. And regardless of who plays quarterback, whether it's Allen, whether it's Smith, I think that makes the overall Washington team better compared to Haskins. So I'm kind of fading him this week. And since he's primarily the main running back to own for the Giants, that automatically means we're fading Dion Lewis and Wayne Gallman. Then we've got the Ravens at the Eagles. I'm starting Miles Sanders here. He's the primary running back that you want to start in this game. Yes, he had a big-time touchdown this last week versus the Steelers, really outplayed the matchup. But again, I wouldn't be expecting that type of performance from him because outside of that, 70-plus yard touchdown, it wasn't that huge of a day for Miles Sanders. But regardless, he will still be a low-end RB1 for the Eagles. And as far as our sits, I'm sitting all the running backs for the Ravens marking room. J.K. Dobbins, if you want to throw in Gus Edwards in there, feel free. Just too many running backs. Neither one of these guys getting enough volume vulturing each other. And, ultimately ceding work to Lamar Jackson. Then we've got the Falcons at the Vikings. I'm starting both of these running backs here. Todd Gurley, he's the primary running back for the Falcons. He's had a nice couple of weeks, and the matchup versus the Vikings isn't all that scary. I'll continue to fire him up as a high-end RB2. And for the Vikings, this could get interesting. We saw Dalvin Cook leave that game versus Seattle with a groin injury. He did return later on, but just spectated on the sidelines. We have to see the severity of this thing before we can confidently say that he's a must start. But obviously, if he suits up, you're going to start him. He's a top 5 running back. If he doesn't suit up, then Alexander Mattison enters the conversation, and he is also an RB1. So you just have to track the situation in terms of Dalvin Cook and that groin injury. As far as our sits, Brian Hill, I'm sitting him. He's had some nice opportunities, but this is still the Todd Gurley show. So for that reason, I'm fading Brian Hill. Moving on, we've got the Jets at the Dolphins. I'm starting both these running backs, Le'Veon Bell and Myles Gaskin. I think that Le'Veon Bell has a decent matchup here versus the Dolphins. Yes, this Jets offense is nothing to write home about, and we probably have to just concede that Le'Veon Bell is an RB2, at least in this system, so keep that in mind. Myles Gaskin coming off a pretty successful outing. I think he can do it again here versus the Jets. I would actually have him ranked higher than Le'Veon Bell in terms of Week 6 running back standard or PPR. Then we've got the Packers at the Buccaneers. I'm starting Aaron Jones and I'm starting Ronald Jones. Both these guys have decent opportunities in terms of volume. Aaron Jones does have the tougher matchup. The Buccaneers do a decent job of stopping opposing running backs, but I just think in terms of how important he is to this offense, he will get his opportunities also as a pass catcher. So I see him as a low-end RB1 on the week, whereas Ronald Jones, even if Leonard Fournette plays, you see right now we've got Fournette as a sit. I think he's done very well these last couple of weeks to be that number 1 running back for the Bucs. I see him as a mid-level RB2. A lot of this will come down to the game flow of this contest in terms of if the Buccaneers fall behind, because if that happens, then Ronald Jones will kind of take a back seat. But if it's close, it's back and forth, then Ronald Jones could maybe even outproduce Aaron Jones. But, that's maybe wishful thinking. Regardless, though, he's got decent upside for Week 6. Then we've got the Rams at the 49ers. The only running back I want to start here is Raheem Mostert. In his first game back from injury, we saw that Mostert was pretty much the most reliable guy on this offense. And whether Jimmy Garoppolo plays or he doesn't, I still believe that Raheem Mostert will have plenty of upside in this game. I view him as a high-end RB2. And then as far as our sits, it might be tough to see both Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson as sits. But Darrell Henderson, Vulture's Malcolm Brown, and then when you throw Cam Akers into the equation, it just becomes an absolute cluster. You don't know who to start on a week-to-week basis. You know, 1 week it was Malcolm Brown, then it was Darrell Henderson, and then when you throw Sean McVay's game planning, it all becomes tough. I just think right now it's a little bit too tough to predict. If you had to pick one, I would go with Darrell Henderson, obviously because he has the hot hand, but I can't 100% say that with confidence. So keep that in mind. And then Jerick McKinnon is also a sit. You know, it was nice to see him do his thing while Mostert was out, but it's clear to see that this is Mostert's show. And with him healthy, Jerick McKinnon becomes an afterthought. Then we've got the Chiefs at the Bills, starting Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You know, he would have had a much better outing versus the Raiders if he didn't have a touchdown called back. I think he'll have plenty of opportunities in a high-scoring offense, in a high-scoring game versus the Bills. I see him as a low-end RB1. And then Devin Singletary. Yes, the Bills are, you know, playing on Tuesday in week 5, so we don't really know what to expect from this running back tandem in Singletary and Moss, but I've said it before, I think Singletary has the hot hand unless something unexpected happens on Tuesday night between the Bills and the Titans. Then I would be starting Devin Singletary and then sitting Zach Moss. And then Cardinals at the Cowboys. I'm starting both running backs for the Cardinals, Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds. But this is primarily because of the matchup. If it wasn't, then honestly, we have to view Kenyon Drake as a mid-level RB2, maybe even a low-end RB2. Hurts me to say that, but that's the case. He just hasn't gotten the pass-catching volume, whereas Chase Edmonds is trending in that upwards direction. That's why you see him as a start in this game. I like the matchup versus the Cowboys. I think both these guys can have opportunities. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me to see Chase Edmonds outscore Kenyon Drake. And then obviously the no-brainer, Ezekiel Elliott. You start him every single week. And now probably even more so with Dak Prescott out and Andy Dalton under center. The Cowboys will rely even more so on Ezekiel Elliott, a top 3 running back. So with that, we wrap up this week 6 running back start and sit breakdown. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section along with any other start or sit questions you guys might have. We will do our best to answer them. And in the meantime, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. We'll answer your questions on there as well. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com to sign up for a free newsletter to get exclusive content. All the details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.